Hi, I'm Judy Velasco, and people call me Judy. I work at HBO. I've been working here for 9 years as a paralegal under Meeka Bondy, who's the Senior Vice President at HBO. Right now, we're going to be talking about her life and her story. She has been a mentor to me through the 9 years I've worked here at HBO and has been such a great inspiration. And I would love to share that story with you. Hi, Meeka.
Hi, Judy. How are you?
I'm doing good. So I wanted to share some questions that hopefully you can answer to the best of your knowledge and tell us more about your career.
Great.
So to start off, I wanted to know why you became a lawyer, and also what made you choose to be a lawyer that works on IP law as opposed to the other types of law.
Okay, great question. So when I was a little girl, my first desire for a job was to be actually a broadcast journalist. And I went to school, but my parents were telling me that I had to be a doctor. So I went to college and I signed up to be pre-med. I discovered after working in a hospital that I actually really didn't like being in hospitals. And I decided that if I didn't like to be in hospitals, I probably shouldn't be a doctor. So instead, I started to look at philosophy classes and learning how to write and think. And I tried to think about what would be a practical application of that skill, because I really enjoyed writing papers and thinking about life and philosophy and even the logic behind it. So when I started thinking about maybe being a journalist, I realized there was a big sacrifice that you have to make to become a successful journalist, which usually means traveling to some godforsaken place in the middle of nowhere and kind of working your way up. And I realized that I didn't have the stamina really to do it that way, so I decided that a practical application of my writing and speaking and thinking skills would be to be a lawyer. When I went to law school, obviously there were all types of different laws that you could do, and initially my first desire was actually to become a corporate lawyer, a mergers and acquisitions lawyer, because that always looked like the most esoteric and most high quality kind of law. But when I started to look at jobs after school, in my law school they had a recruiting center, and I noticed a job with a mid-sized law firm. It wasn't a big white shoe law firm, and they had this interesting specialty. They decided to start a law firm that was focused on computer law. And I thought that that sounded really interesting, like being on the cutting edge of technology and how does law interplay with that. So I decided to join that firm. It was called Brown, Raisin, Milstein, Felder, and Steiner, like all law firms, a bunch of names. And it was great. I went there, and because it was a mid-sized law firm and couched itself as sort of a family-style law firm, I got a lot of experience very early on, because there weren't a lot of levels, or there wasn't a lot of hierarchy there, and that's kind of how I started.
Oh, that's great. After you've done that and you've graduated and worked in that law firm, can you tell me about your career path and how you now got to where you are currently in your current title at HBO?
Yes. So, as some people know who are in the law field, when you start at a law firm, you basically have to sacrifice your life for a few years. I worked on a lot of deals where you had to stay up all day and negotiate at the table, and then as a junior associate you'd have to go back to the hotel room or whatever and be drafting all night and not sleep and then show up the next day. And I did that many, many times over the course of 3 years. And then I decided that I was initially kind of thinking that maybe I'd make partner at the law firm, but then an interesting opportunity kind of fell in my lap. So I have been working with Time Inc., which is a magazine publishing company, and they had a very interesting sort of entrepreneurial group called Time Inc. New Media at the time. And Time Inc. New Media was an interesting proposition. What they did was they took all of the Time Inc. brands, Time, Fortune, Entertainment Weekly, et cetera, and they put it into one online portal. And so the thought was that all of the Time Inc. brands could live in this one online website. And I thought that sounded really interesting. On top, I had actually been doing work for some of the people there, so when the job came available, the people at Time Inc. already knew me. And so that's how I sort of found myself in Time Inc., actually replacing somebody who was my client, because she moved to the business side, and then I joined Time Inc. And the great thing about Time Inc. at the time was each lawyer was sort of dedicated to a magazine or a particular business part of Time Inc. So you sort of acted like a quasi-general counsel for that particular area of the business, and I found it fascinating. It was right at the cusp of the internet explosion. But I specifically remember actually the CEO of Time Inc. saying, the internet is the black hole. And what he meant by that was that you put money in and you don't see anything come out. So I quickly realized that this magazine publishing company that was experimenting on the internet really had that wasn't their core business, and that wasn't the direction they were going in. So the general counsel at the time started to give me some libel work, looking at journalistic text and calling the reporter and making sure that it was true and backed up. And I realized that I really didn't like libel law. So I think a lot of knowing where you want to go is trying new things, but then really being honest with yourself and deciding whether you like it or not. And there's so many things to do in life, there's no reason to push yourself to do something that you don't enjoy.
Right.
So once I realized that I didn't want to do libel work, there was another position open at Time Warner. Time Inc. was part of Time Warner Inc. at the time. And again, it was a sort of entrepreneurial kind of business, and what they wanted to do was create a new business called the networked PVR. And what they wanted to do was actually you would record all the television shows, and then you'd be able to look back or start it over again. And now this seems so simple because on-demand television is all over the industry, but at the time it was a really novel concept. And so I decided to join them. It was really one of the best jobs I ever had because it was really exciting and entrepreneurial, and we were dealing with all sorts of cutting-edge legal issues. But at some point, the parent company decided that it was an interesting experiment that wasn't worth funding anymore. So after 2 years there, I was out of a job. They had folded down the entire division. I had an opportunity to work at Time Warner Cable, which was located in Stamford, Connecticut at the time, and I also got an offer here at HBO in New York. I had just started a family. I had 2 young children at the time, so honestly my decision was completely driven by geography at the time. Decided that New York City was a lot closer to where I lived than Stamford, so I took the HBO job, and that's how I ended up here.
Oh, that's great. And then you started here in HBO when I started working here with you, you were I believe you were a vice president at the time.
So yeah, that was another thing that happened. So when I joined HBO, they were looking for a particular slot, and it was being advertised and offered as a senior counsel position. When I was at my prior job, Time Warner Interactive Video Group, I was VP of Legal Affairs. So I really had to make a decision about whether I wanted to take a sort of drop in title, as well as it was less money, not significantly less, but enough to think about. So when I looked at HBO, I decided that it's a great company. It was still within Time Warner, so a lot of my benefits and that sort of thing and my longevity there would sort of carry over. I knew a lot of the people already, having been at Time Inc., so I decided to take that job even though it was a drop in title and a little bit of a drop in salary. And then when I came here, I was actually hired by somebody who's not my boss today. I was hired by another person, and because of moves and other transitions, I ended up reporting to a new person. And the new person that I reported into was somebody who ended up becoming a very important mentor and sponsor for my career here at HBO.
I was going to ask you who would be one of your favorite mentors, and I guess you just answered your question.
Yeah, so my current boss really was a true mentor to me, and a sponsor, which I do think are different. A mentor is somebody who gives you advice and who you can talk to about difficult situations and sort of tells you how to deal with certain challenges. A sponsor is somebody who doesn't necessarily give you advice, but speaks your praises throughout the organization. So she really served both roles, but I would say that it took some time for her to feel that I was a worthy mentee, because she didn't hire me, she didn't really know me, she didn't know what my motivation was, and I think it took a while for her to understand my value, what my intentions were, whether I even wanted to stay at HBO for very long. But once she sort of saw me work on a few transactions and saw the work ethic that I brought to the table, the energy I brought, and the dedication I brought, I think she realized that there was some potential worth investing in. So once that happened, we had a very, very close relationship. She ended up putting me in charge of another sort of entrepreneurial group within HBO. And so I think that's kind of a pattern, which it wasn't necessarily completely planned out, but I found myself gravitating towards sort of the innovative and entrepreneurial sides of the businesses, even though they were in relatively traditional media companies. So when I was given the opportunity to be the head lawyer for HBO Enterprises, and she really thought that I was the right person. I took that and decided to do a really, really good job on it, and it sort of went from there.
Yeah, I like that. So I was wondering, so now how long have you been working at HBO already?
Oh gosh, it is now going into my 13th year, so 13 years ago. And when I think back, I thought I was a hotshot when I arrived, but when I look back, I was such a baby lawyer in comparison to where I am now. And it really was because of that relationship with my boss that I was able to, show the extra stuff that I could bring to the table. And I think what was interesting about HBO Enterprises in particular was they were in the startup mode of their business. So I really got to be there from the ground floor. They also asked for more than just legal advice. It wasn't just about writing contracts or opining about regulatory matters. It really was understanding what their business was and being able to bring solutions to them instead of telling them why they can't do something, which is what some lawyers end up doing. So as that business grew, the deals got larger, the responsibility got larger. We ended up having to hire you, right? We also had to hire another 2 more attorneys. So I was able to build a team as that business grew. And as more responsibilities came and more challenges came and more deals came and the business started growing, I was able to grow with it. And at the very end, it meant that I was promoted from senior counsel. Then there was a VP and senior counsel, which is when you met me. And then after that, there was another one called VP of Legal Affairs. And then finally now I'm SVP of Legal Affairs. So that's sort of the history at HBO.
Yes, I mean, that's a great accomplishment. I'm really happy to have witnessed and seen, your progress into where you are.
And you were always such a key member of that team
thank
of figuring out what the client needed and being very responsive and smart about the business side of it, not just the legal part of it.
Oh, great. Yeah, thank you. And, in a way, I feel like you're paying it forward as well by being a mentor to me and being able to build my career here at HBO. So thank you.
Yes, and I've seen you grow tremendously since you've been here.
Oh, thank you.
You really were a baby when you arrived.
I was really young. So one of the questions I did want to ask you was, so what is the biggest conflict you've ever faced? Now, I'm not going to say at HBO, but just in work in general.
Yeah.
And what did you do in order to get over that obstacle?
So I think that your conflicts at work change over time. So I think when I was a younger lawyer, you really, when you're a young person starting out in a profession, you really serve as an individual contributor. It's really about what work are you doing and are you able to deliver quality work in time. As you move further in your career, you have to do more than that. You can't just worry about your work. You have to worry about the work of people who report into you, as well as even people who don't report into you outside of that. And so one of the most difficult situations I found myself in was we worked on a very tough deal. The reason that deal was difficult was it wasn't something that HBO normally did as a business. And when HBO did that deal, it had to weigh a lot of different interests. So there were a lot of different constituencies at the company with different points of view of whether we should do that deal in the first place and then how it should be done. So the deal was structured in a way where I worked with my normal client as well as a few new people. And I found it hard at times when you were hearing conflicting interests from different stakeholders, and no one was acting in bad faith. Everybody was protecting or at least opining about the effect on their business and wanting to make sure that the deal was done right. It was hard to sort of hear disparate voices and figuring out what should go into the deal. And then once you figured that out, then you had to sell it into the company that you're selling it into. You're negotiating with another party. So that was probably one of the harder transactions I worked on.
And what did you do to kind of keep yourself, sane from this whole experience?
Yeah, so I think for me, when I was prior to HBO, when I was at that prior job with Time Warner Interactive Video Group, it was also called Maestro TV. That was different because it was a much smaller business and it was a smaller senior management team. So when we had an issue, all of us just got in the room and talked it out, and we were able to figure out a plan of action. Here, it's a bigger company, right, with a larger business. But I ended up sort of doing the same thing, which is getting people in the room, right? So I had a lot of one-on-one conversations with different people with different interests, and I also had a lot of situations where there was a bigger group kind of meeting, and ultimately you have to hear what people are worried about, but you also have to always remember, and this is something that a general counsel once told me that I worked for at Time Inc., was remembering what my role was. And I'm a lawyer, but my client is HBO, the company. My client is not any one particular person. So you always have to sort of keep in mind what your role is and what you're supposed to be doing, and not just hearing, whatever the last person said.
Yes. And sometimes it must be hard to do that when you have new clients in the room and talking with them, and it's hard not to stay in the role that you're supposed to be. So you did a good job because the deal did get signed.
The deal did get signed, and I think everybody was happy with the way it was signed. And I think the other thing that I would just kind of go back to is when I first came to HBO, because I was in such an entrepreneurial environment right before that, I found actually the company was more bureaucratic than I had expected. And I don't say that with any sort of ill will towards HBO, because that was my first impression when I came in. And then what I realized is there are so many people, really smart people here doing really quality work in their respective areas. So whenever there's a new thing for the company, it does kind of require all those different constituencies to have a say. And even though it might have taken a little bit longer, and I might have initially been frustrated by that process, when I did it a few times before this deal, I saw the value in it. I saw the value in collaborating and getting points of view from different constituencies, because all of that ended up going into the deal, whether it was the technology side, the finance side, the programming side. Particularly when you're engaging in a new business for a company, it does kind of require everybody to sort of rethink what they do, and then how that impacts their business, and also being able for them to buy into a new business.
That's great. That's great advice that you're giving to me. I can imagine, just even in personal life, just when you go to a party and you don't know anybody, and you have to get along and hear people and listen to them. It's
And I think HBO is also, it's one of those places where a lot of people stay for a very long time, as you've seen, and people know each other. People know each other, and they have a relationship. It's not you're not calling just a department, you're calling a person, right? And they have a point of view on things. And I think it really taught me to hear that and not to get frustrated by the pace of the deal or anything like that, because in the end, it would all get done. It would get done well with everybody having felt like they had their input, and usually it always got done in time. There was no issue with that.
Yes. So now that we know about your career path here. Now you built a team, which is great, and I'm really happy to be a part of it. But just one question I had was, so during interview process and when you start interviewing people, what attributes do you look for in a person who is interviewing for a job, and maybe on in HBO or another company?
Right.
What attributes do you look for that you feel this is the person I want on my team?
Right. So I think interviewing is a really tough skill, and hiring good people is actually one of the most important things that a manager does at any company. And I've told you this, and I've also told Trey, who's on our team. There are thousands of qualified people that could take the job. I mean, based on their resume and their accomplishments, they are more than capable of doing the job. They have the skills that are required. Of course, you have to sort of meet that minimum threshold. But once you meet that, like I said, there are thousands of people who could probably have done the job. Then you have to really look at the person. What I look for is, who is this person? I really try to get into, in the interview, what their upbringing was at some level, what drives them. I'd like to see somebody who doesn't necessarily is secure and confident, but doesn't feel like they have all the answers, and feels like has a innate desire to learn. And to do well, that they have pride in their work, and I think that's really important. I also look for somebody who works well with other people. It's important in a company like HBO where relationships are so important, and the only way you get things done is because, the person who is doing it for you likes you and wants to help you, right? So it was important to have people who got along with other people, and then I also look for, I guess, a little savvy. Somebody who's resourceful, who can figure out a solution as opposed to telling you all the rules or why they can't do it or that. Right. So I think it's important for somebody who has figured out how to maneuver a little bit. I think that's important also. And of course, a lot of it is just who you like hanging out with. I mean, a lot of it is just you work so many hours here in the office, so you want to be able to smile when you see the person every day.
Get along with them.
And somebody that you feel like you respect, who actually you admire, and are inspired by. So.
Oh, thanks. The other thing I want to ask is, as well, I mean, also being a minority, well, two minorities, because you are a woman and also Asian American. Did you ever find it difficult during this time? Because you have, because of that you're a minority. Did you ever find that you haven't been recognized or been difficult for your notabilities?
That's an interesting question. I think that today it's harder to find overt instances of prejudice. Most people are relatively educated that that's not the right thing to do. When I was growing up, I was called all kinds of names on the street and stuff like that. There was a lot of that going on. My father as well. And I mean, I can't think to a few instances where something was said that was clearly not the best way to describe me. So, for example, I remember I worked on a really big transaction when I was in my first law firm, and the client on the other side, who liked me and I was doing a great job, called me a cheerleader. And I was thinking to myself, I was not sitting there with pom-poms cheering the deal. I was actually like the workhorse. I was like doing the deal. So I realized that was really very much a sexist comment, right? I wish at the time I had the courage to say, no, I'm more like the quarterback, but I didn't. So I let that comment slide, and it always sort of stuck with me. I also noticed that when I was at the law firm, you had to work with paralegals and assistants to try to get your work done, and particularly among the secretaries, I think they were older than me typically. Right. They had been there longer. They had a closer relationship actually with a lot of the partners because they had been there so long. So in order for me to get my work accomplished, I couldn't walk over there. No offense to all white males, and say, I need this in 5 minutes. Right. I really had to kind of like charm them and beg them and be sweet and do it that way. So I realized early on, you couldn't get to the same results with the same method as somebody that doesn't look like you.
Approach it differently.
Yeah, right. You sort of had to figure out what that was.
And you also have to gain the confidence to do that too.
Yes.
Which could be hard as well.
Yeah, so that's the kind of stuff that I would.
Oh, I can imagine,
But it was never overt. Okay. And then I guess the other piece of being a minority and being a woman is you have some innate things in you. It's not anything that anybody's doing to you, it's something that's inside you. Right. And so you sometimes question yourself, right? like a lot of people do, but when you're a minority, I think you have that sort of, maybe I'm not good enough, or I'm not fitting in, I'm not in that group. So you have all of that sort of baggage, so to speak, that travels with you. For Asian Americans, I've also noticed that a lot of us, we were brought up to be good girls and good boys, do well in school, get straight A's, right? And that some of the extracurricular stuff like theater or other things were not considered as valuable sometimes. You also taught to respect your elders, respect authority, respect the system. Don't call yourself out too much, be humble. And while those are good traits as well, when you get to a certain point, you do have to speak up. You do have to be noticed. And so some of it is not necessarily coming from a natural place, but you have to make yourself do it and kind of train yourself to do it over time.
Oh, That is great. I mean, I've experienced that
Yes.
myself, so I know what you're saying. And so my other question was, so are there any like network groups that women or minorities can join that would help build their career as well as their confidence?
Yes. So I think the great thing about all of this stuff where people are so aware of race and the impact of race in society is that there are a lot of groups that talk about this stuff and try to help minorities. So some of the ones that I've encountered is Women in Cable Telecommunications, otherwise known as WICT. And I was fortunate enough to get picked by HBO to go to the Betsy Magnus Leadership Program.
Oh, wow.
And that was about 5 years ago. And really, I still say this, it was the best gift the company ever gave me, even better than any bonus I got, because I walked away with skills and thinking and friends and a network that I can carry with me anywhere I go. It taught you how to run a team, how to deal with stress, how to deal with difficult people, how to interview, how to stay energized, how to lead, how to manage. And I really think that I learned a lot from that process, and I'm glad I did bring it back here because that's good for the company that I was able to bring back some of the value. And I know a lot of my colleagues have also gone and come back similarly improved and energized. So that's one. The other one that I know of in the media industry is NAMIC, and that's for minority professionals in the media space. And then, you know, there are a ton of those sorts of organizations all over, and leadership seems to be kind of like it's like become a thing. Like there's a gazillion books written on the stuff, right? And then there's a lot of people who facilitate and coach in the area, and of course there are a lot of programs built around leadership. And these are all soft skills that you don't necessarily learn in college or graduate school. And I think for me in particular, like, I was actually afraid of, I've told you this, I'm terrified of public speaking, right? So the ability to communicate is obviously key in being a good leader. So I really had to kind of overcome this honestly by practicing and getting more comfortable with it. And I think that helped me a lot with my confidence and my delivery.
Oh, that's so good. You're doing a great job. So
Thank you.
it doesn't even show that you had a fear of speaking in public, really.
I think I used to visibly shake, but hopefully not anymore.
Not anymore. You're a trained professional. You're trained for that. So before, when you said that you were trying to figure out a job, when you had an offer in Connecticut and you had the one here in New York, and you chose the one here in New York, HBO, because of geographically you had a new family. So I guess some advice on just how to be able to balance those two and just, you know, have both your work life and your home life parallel to one another.
Right. So I think the first thing I start with is I'm so thankful and grateful that I'm really living my dream. I'm living in the city. I have a great job. I have a great husband. I have 3 great kids. So no matter how hard it is, if you start by being grateful about the fact that you have all of this stuff, you know you can make it work. I mean, when you look at your kids' faces, there's never any regret. I mean, because they're just miracles. So I start with that. I think when they were younger, I probably was pivoted more towards home. I said to myself, there's no project, deal, or anything at work that is more important than me getting home for dinner. And that's sort of how I said it in my mind. And now, of course, there were times when, you know, my husband covered or whatever.
Right.
But that was at least my mindset. I think it's also really important to have a husband or a partner that's a true partner who considers child rearing and keeping a home a joint, you know, a shared task, not something that only falls on the woman or, you know, on the man. So I think that's also important. And when you have that kind of buy-in from your partner, you figure out on a day-to-day basis, like, who has to be home when. And then I guess the third thing I would say is, and I learned this over time, I used to sort of have 2 selves. I had my professional self, right, that went to the office and did work, and then I had the personal self that was the mom and the wife that went home. And I realized that was a really tiring way to live your life. And very unauthentic in both places, because that is not you. That you are both of those things. You're not one or the other.
Right.
So I really try to bring my whole self to work. It doesn't mean you have to tell everybody all your dark secrets, but bringing your personality and your energy and who you are to work. And then when I went home, I started to bring things that I learned at work home to my kids, life lessons, whatever. I'm just talking about it even, just so that mommy going to work wasn't this sort of mysterious thing, and then, you know, suddenly she would come home and be mom. I wanted them to see that I was this full person. And then a lot of, sometimes when I think about what I'm doing, and if I'm scared about doing something, I often think about, imagine you're a child, you know, your son, your daughter sitting there watching you. What would they want to see you do? They wouldn't want you to be scared.
Right.
They wouldn't want you to be dishonest about who you are. They'd want to see you do it like as they know you. And so that really helped me sort of bridge the gap.
I'm gonna always think that way.
Yeah,
I never thought about that.
Because like I said, I hired you. I didn't hire this person who accomplished these things and has all these, you know. This is your story. Your story is all of you. So I think when you bring your authentic self both home and to work,
that makes sense.
It becomes much more fluid. And you know, a lot of being a good mom is not just, you know, putting food on the table or doing the laundry. A lot of being a good mom is showing them what a life is. You want your kids also to grow up and have a full life. And you want them to have it all too. You want them to have a beautiful family life, a lot of friends. You want them to also be able to go to work where they feel energized and proud of themselves. So if you want that for them, you have to at least try to get it for yourself.
Oh yeah. I'm glad that you're sharing that with me and the other people who are listening, because especially if you're a new mom like myself who is still trying to handle the balance between work life and family life, hearing, you know, solid advice that you just gave gives us hope and that we can make it through, because there are some times where it can be very, very
but
hard.
I mean, even with you, I know there are some, you have some tough mornings sometimes with this
yes.
kid or that. You're honest with me. I mean, because you brought your whole self to work. I know you're a mom of 2 young kids. So when you tell me that you're having some issue, how could I not feel for that? How could I not understand that? Because I've been through that, and I'm seeing that you're being honest to me about it. And I know when you're here, you get your work done.
I do,
you know, and so it just becomes, you know, you treat each other with respect and with understanding that our whole life isn't here. A lot of it is in the house or at home with other people. So I think it becomes much more fluid when you're able to be your whole self in both places.
Yeah, and I guess I do try to be like that when I'm here. And I'm also blessed just to even have a boss like you who's understanding in that way, because not everybody who has a job can have those type of understanding bosses. So.
Right, and I think when you look for a job, if family is something important and you want to have that sort of flexibility, you have to look for the right company and the right sort of boss. And I think that other people make different decisions. Other people say, okay, I'm going to be the one who goes to the office and makes money, and the other person's going to really stay at home. So for those people, the calculation is a little different. Than the person who's going to work might have to stay late all the time and travel, and that's fine too. But it's just it has to be something that works for that family.
Right. Oh, okay, that's great. Well, I also have just like some random questions. You know, I wrote it down because they were random, so I just want to and feel free. You don't have to answer them if you don't want to. Okay. But these are just random questions.
The curveball.
Yeah, so you're my curveball question. So, what's on your bucket list of the 3 top places you would want to visit in your lifetime?
Gosh. I really want to go to the Galapagos Islands.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Because it's like you learned about it when you learned about Darwinian evolution, so you were fascinated when you were a little kid. And they have like animals and plants and stuff that they don't have anywhere else in the world. And I've also heard amazing stories about that place, so that's definitely on my list.
Mine too.
I have been to Korea twice, once when I was like 7 and the other time when I was about 22. But I've never been with my family. And my family, actually my kids are half Korean because my husband's Jewish. So we're all Jewish, but he's white. So I think it would be great to be able to bring them to Korea to meet their Korean side of the family. And I guess the 3rd place would be that I haven't been. I also would love to go to a safari in Africa.
Wow.
But I don't, some of these things are, you can put them in the bucket, but you're not 100% sure you're going to actually get there.
But you never know.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
never know.
yeah. But those are the 3 places I've
Safari
been.
sounds good. That wasn't on my bucket list, but now I'm thinking I might
Maybe you put it in there
after you said that. Okay. So those are great places.
Yeah. So hopefully.
One of the 3 I agree with. Yeah. Maybe the safari too. So, do you feel that you have accomplished all the goals you set for yourself, or are there more that you're trying to uncover? Are there more?
I guess I have goals, but at this moment in my life, I feel pretty fulfilled.
That's good.
And I don't feel it's good to have goals, but sometimes goals can sort of eat you up because you get sort of obsessed with reaching them, and then you feel really bad when you don't. So if I had a goal, I would just have a goal of making sure that my life continues to have a lot of meaning. And I think that's what we're all sort of searching for, is that here we are, somebody placed us here. And you don't want to kind of go through your life and go through the motions. You want to really feel like your life had some sort of meaning. And that's a combination of, doing well professionally, of course, being a good mom and being a good wife, but having some impact on the world, and that would be, I guess, a goal. It's not an amorphous goal, so it's one that you can succeed just by doing it every day.
True. Yes, that is.
Sorry, I should back up by saying that I used to want to be general counsel. That was my goal, was to become general counsel of a company, and that goal has not materialized for me yet. But that's why I'm saying goals can kind of sometimes eat you up. I used to be much more consumed by reaching that goal and feeling badly that I wasn't getting close enough to the goal. But now that I look at all the pieces of my life, I realize that I'm having a great life, and it doesn't have to include that particular goal. It's okay if I don't make that one.
Right. Oh, no, that's good. That's good. So if you don't have this job, what would have been your dream job?
Oh, okay. My dream job would have been to be a broadcast journalist.
It was to be
my dream job actually was to be Larry King.
Oh, yeah.
Because to sit in that chair and
funny.
interview some of the most fascinating people in the world.
That's true.
I would have loved to have been him. Of course, he doesn't have that show anymore. And maybe Barbara Walters. Maybe she's a better example because she's a woman. But I don't know why I always think of Larry King. Or Charlie Rose also does those things.
Yes.
But I find hearing people's stories from where they came, what their upbringing was, and then what they dreamed of and what they did when they were younger, and then all the way to when they actually are successful and accomplished, and hearing what drives them, what makes them happy, what choices they made. I find it fascinating.
That's actually something that you may in your other lifetime.
right. I could maybe still.
You could. And then just before we end this, I didn't know if maybe you might want to share anything that's encouraging words or quotes that help you get through life's ups and downs.
So the one quote that I heard in the past maybe 5 years, and it's often attributed to Nelson Mandela, but I heard it's actually from a poem or a book written by Marianne Williamson. And I'm not going to quote it exactly, but it's something like, our biggest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our biggest fear is that we're actually more powerful than we know, that there's more light than darkness in each of us. And I kind of know what it means, because my husband said it differently to me whenever I had tough times at work or whatever, I was feeling insecure and inadequate. He used to say to me, "You're already everything you want to be." And I just thought that was really powerful. So, and I should say that my husband is probably one of my most important mentors.
Oh, that's so sweet.
And my best friend.
Me too. I don't know mentor, but yes, best friend.
Yes.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yes, and I think when you have that kind of relationship with, you have your soulmates, as they call it, it just makes everything in life go beautifully and well.
You need that other person, because especially when you have the job that you have, it's very helpful, and that's good that you have that kind of bond together. So I'm happy.
Yeah, it really grounds you,
It does, and I have that as well. So I'm happy as well.
That's really nice.
Yeah. He's not a lawyer though, so he doesn't understand what I tell him.
Right, but that's okay.
He just says, everything
yeah.
will be okay.
Yeah, no, but it's like he knows you and he
knows me.
understands
Right.
at least the emotion that's coming out of you, even if he doesn't understand the circumstance.
Right.
And that that means a lot to have somebody really hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Thank
Meeka.
you,
I
Judy.
really
This is
appreciate it.
fun.